film begins with a retired soldier named Mick preparing to leave, carrying a file of important documents and a photograph of himself with another man. On the way, Mick stops by a hardware store and purchases a sledgehammer before continuing his journey. His car eventually stops in front of an old rubber factory. Upon Mick's arrival, a factory worker confronts him, asking him to leave. However, Mick claims to be the brother of Laszlo, prompting the worker to contact the factory's boss, Renda. When Mick meets Renda, he reveals the purpose of his visit, to demand compensation for the death of his younger brother, Laszlo, who allegedly died in a workplace accident at the factory. The man in the photograph with Mick turns out to be Laszlo. At that moment, Mick presents official death benefit claim papers, showing that his brother's family is entitled to $12,750 in compensation. However, instead of complying, Renda laughs at him and insults Mick. Despite the ridicule, Mick refuses to leave without the compensation. Angered, Renda orders his men to drag Mick out and beat him up. Using his combat skills, Mick fights back and takes down Renda's men. Unfortunately, Renda suddenly appears and points a shotgun at Mick from behind. Surrounded and outnumbered, Mick has no choice but to surrender. Renda then reports Mick to the police, accusing him of assault and attempted murder. Mick is arrested that very day. At the police station, Mick meets a detective named Borelli and her partner, Agent Langley. They suspect Laszlo's death is connected to an illegal smuggling operation. Mick is shocked to learn that his brother did not die in an accident but was murdered. Detective Borelli then offers to help reduce Mick's sentence if he agrees to cooperate in their investigation. They need information on the smuggling activities inside Pleasant Hill Prison. Mick, still hesitant, is unsure about accepting the deal, not wanting to be involved in further trouble. Mick is then transferred to Pleasant Hill Prison, a remote facility. Like most new inmates, he is met with ridicule and hostility from the senior prisoners. When Mick arrives at his cell, a fellow inmate warns him to stay quiet and endure whatever comes his way. Confused, Mick does not understand the meaning behind the inmate's words. Moments later, a guard orders all prisoners to return to their cells as the doors are about to be locked. That night, Mick is forcibly removed from his cell and attacked by 3 guards. They beat him and use electric batons, leaving Mick screaming in agony. Meanwhile, other prisoners hear his cries but only laugh, as if it is a normal occurrence. They know Mick has become the latest punching bag for the night shift guards. After the brutal beating, Mick is thrown into a small, filthy isolation cell. The following morning, the prison warden, a woman named Warden, visits Mick. Unlike a typical prison warden, Warden looks like a socialite wearing expensive branded clothing. Calmly, she offers Mick a cup of coffee and starts a casual conversation. During their talk, Warden advises Mick to follow the prison rules if he wants to stay safe and avoid punishment like the one he endured the night before. Though it sounds like advice, Mick quickly realizes it is a thinly veiled threat. Warden makes it clear that she will not tolerate any trouble under her supervision. After being released from the isolation cell, Mick joins the other inmates for breakfast. There, he meets a few prisoners, including his cell neighbor, Tex. During their conversation, Tex reminds Mick once again not to fight back if he wants to avoid harsher punishment. Tex explains that what happened the night before was a customary welcome for new inmates in the prison. While eating, Mick notices another prisoner eating a different meal from the others. Bud, one of the inmates, explains that the man is Bunyan, who receives special treatment because he works for the head warden. At that moment, they warn Mick to avoid trouble with Bunyan unless he wants to face severe consequences. After breakfast, Mick and the other prisoners begin their daily routine of cleaning the prison yard. While working, Mick notices an elderly inmate struggling to carry some supplies. Mick approaches to help him. The old prisoner, often called Wizard, is known for his rambling and strange behavior, as though he believes himself to be a wizard. Wizard then tells Mick about an unused tunnel located in Block D. According to him, the prison was once an asylum, and the tunnel was used to transport corpses in and out of the facility. The tunnel reportedly leads straight to the forest outside the prison. Wizard claims that anyone who can enter the tunnel has a chance to escape from the deadly prison. Unfortunately, no one believes his stories. When the break bell rings, the inmates are given 15 minutes to rest before returning to work. In the yard, 2 groups of prisoners can be seen, each standing on opposing sides. A muscular inmate steps forward and challenges Bunyan to a one-on-one fight. As the self-proclaimed King of Cell Block 13, Bunyan accepts the challenge without hesitation, confident he can defend his title as the most feared inmate. And the fight begins. However, the situation quickly spirals out of control when one of Bunyan's men suddenly attacks the muscular inmate with a knife. This enrages the other prisoners, and a full-blown brawl breaks out. Chaos ensues as the guards release tear gas to disperse the fight. Watching from the tower above, Warden orders the guards to fire warning shots into the crowd to bring the situation under control. The next day, while Mick is working in the storage area, his friend Greenhorn accidentally drops one of the sacks. Its contents spill out, revealing a hidden package of smuggled contraband. Shocked, they quickly return the sack to the truck before the guards notice. Later that day, Mick receives a phone call from Detective Borelli, asks if Mick has gathered any information during his time in the prison. Speaking in secret, Mick tells her that he discovered contraband being smuggled through shipments from Renda's company. Hearing this, Borelli promises to request parole for Mick in return for his cooperation. Meanwhile, the assistant warden reports her findings about Mick. Through CCTV surveillance, Warden has been secretly monitoring Mick and knows that Detective Borelli contacted him. Warden also learns that Mick was arrested following charges filed by Renda, her partner in the smuggling operation. Angered, Warden goes to Renda's factory to confront him. Renda claims he only wanted to stop Mick from discovering the smuggling operation. However, Warden sternly warns Renda not to act without her permission again. In the prison, Greenhorn is seen desperately trying to escape from the sadistic guards who hunt him down for no reason. Unfortunately, Greenhorn is surrounded from all sides and struck with a powerful electric shock. The force of the shock knocks him unconscious, and he dies instantly. His lifeless body is left lying there overnight, only to be taken away by the guards the next morning. While the other prisoners head to breakfast, Mick is ordered to clean Greenhorn's bloodstains from the floor. At the same time, Warden arrives and offers Mick a deal. Warden promises to reduce Mick's sentence if he agrees to work for her. Her true intention, however, is to intimidate Mick into submission and ensure he does not interfere with her illegal smuggling operation. To further silence the problem, Warden strikes a deal with Bunyan, the prison's most feared inmate, to keep everything under control. Surprisingly, even Bunyan, known for his ruthless demeanor, looks terrified of Warden's threats. Despite her calm and polite facade, Warden is like a venomous snake, deadly and cunning. The next day, Bunyan begins provoking Mick. He deliberately drops his own food and blames Mick in front of the other inmates. Feeling falsely accused, Mick refuses to stay silent. He taunts Bunyan further, making him angrier. When one of Bunyan's men mocks Mick, he elbows the man, causing his mouth to bleed. At that moment, Tex warns Mick to stay alert, as he has now become the target of Bunyan and his gang. True to Tex's warning, Bunyan ambushes Mick during their shift in the storage area. During the fierce fight, Mick gains the upper hand and nearly defeats Bunyan by choking him. However, Warden arrives to watch the brawl and throws a metal chain to Bunyan, which he uses to counter Mick's attacks. Mick, quick on his feet, grabs a wooden plank to block Bunyan's strikes. In the end, Mick manages to choke Bunyan with the chain again. But instead of finishing him off, Mick restrains himself, refusing to become a monster like Renda or Warden, who will kill without hesitation for their own gain. Mick's decision disappoints some inmates who had hoped Bunyan would be eliminated. Warden, visibly angered, orders her assistant to throw both Mick and Bunyan into isolation cells. While the other inmates return to their daily activities, Mick is seen handcuffed in the isolation cell, ensuring he cannot cause any more disturbances. Not long after, a doctor enters Mick's cell carrying a syringe filled with medication. As the doctor prepares to inject Mick, Bunyan suddenly appears from behind and knocks the doctor out. It turns out that both Mick and Bunyan have been planning an escape. At the same time, the other prisoners are also preparing for a rebellion against the guards who have been torturing them. Meanwhile, Bunyan and Mick make their way to the prison chapel, hoping to find an exit. Unfortunately, the exit door is locked, and a guard holds the key. To escape, they are forced to face the guard in a fight. Once they retrieve the key and open the door, they are shocked to discover an entire room stocked with weapons, ammunition, and explosives, items used by the guards to intimidate the prisoners. While they search through the weapons, a group of guards suddenly bursts in and attacks. Bunyan immediately steps forward, fighting off the guards with relentless force. Meanwhile, Warden, panicked as the prison falls under the control of rebellious inmates, desperately searches for a way to escape with her assistant. Although Warden knows all the escape routes and holds the keys to every door, the entire facility has been overrun by inmates who have successfully taken down the guards. Desperate not to be caught, Warden sacrifices her assistant to save herself. Elsewhere, Mick and Bunyan continue their search for an exit, despite being confronted by prison guards and the doctor, who turns out to still be alive. With quick reflexes, they manage to defeat their attackers. At the same time, they witness Wizard being brutally shot to death. Determined to escape, Mick and Bunyan leave the building and head for the yard, where they face a SWAT team in an intense gunfight. As the situation becomes increasingly dangerous, they enter another room, hoping to find a way out. When they discover two pathways, they decide to split up to save time. Finally, Bunyan stumbles upon a hidden door leading to the tunnel that Wizard had once described. Just as Bunyan is about to call Mick, Warden suddenly appears and tries to kill him. However, Mick arrives just in time and shoots Warden. As always, Warden attempts to manipulate Mick with sweet words, trying to convince him to let her go. Unfortunately for her, this time she faces the wrong man. Unmoved by her deceit, Mick ends Warden's life in the very prison she built with her dirty money. At the same time, Tex, who leads the inmate rebellion, negotiates with the SWAT team. Tex demands that the police summon the governor and major organizations to Pleasant Hill Prison to expose the corrupt and abusive punishment system within its walls. Meanwhile, Mick and Bunyan escape through the tunnel. Once outside, Bunyan is overjoyed to finally feel the fresh air, something he hasn't experienced in years. After making their way through the forest, they decide to split up to avoid being tracked by the police. Before parting ways, Bunyan apologizes to Mick for all the harm he caused in prison. He admits that he was forced to serve Warden to survive. Seeing Mick destroy Warden's oppressive regime, Bunyan calls him a true hero. A few weeks later, after escaping the prison, Mick visits his younger brother's grave for the first time. Suddenly, several police cars arrive, surrounding the area. Panicked, Mick fears being arrested and sent back to prison. At that moment, Detective Borelli and Agent Langley appear. They reassure Mick that he will not be arrested, as his fugitive status has been cleared. Thanks to his help, the police successfully dismantled the largest smuggling syndicate in America, and the governor agreed to drop all charges against him. Not only that, but Mick also finally receives the death compensation for his brother that he had fought so hard for. Agent Langley even offers Mick a job working with the government. However, Mick hesitates as his priority now is to care for his family. In the final scene, Mick visits Renda at his factory, carrying the sledgehammer he once bought as a souvenir. With a menacing tone, Mick forces Renda to confess all his crimes. He then ties Renda to a running grinder machine. In the end, Renda meets the consequences of his actions, and Mick finally avenges his brother's death. The film ends. Moral lesson from the story: never mess with a retired soldier's family, or you might end up learning that factories aren't just for making rubber, but also for grinding regrets. And remember, if someone asks for compensation, just pay up. It's much cheaper than getting chased with a sledgehammer.